Sarah Mitchell pulled her thick winter coat tighter around her body as she walked through the deep snow. The cold wind hit her face like tiny needles. She had been a park ranger at Yellowstone National Park for 8 years, but this winter was one of the worst she had ever seen. It was her job to check the back areas of the park every week, even in winter. Most people thought the park was empty during these cold months, but Sarah knew better. Animals still lived here, and they needed someone to watch over them. Sometimes hikers got lost too, and rangers like Sarah were their only hope. The weather report that morning had said light snow, but now thick white flakes fell from the dark sky like a heavy blanket. Sarah could barely see 10 feet in front of her. The wind howled through the tall pine trees, making a scary sound that echoed through the empty forest. She checked her watch. It was only 2 in the afternoon, but the sky was so dark it looked like evening. Sarah knew she should turn back soon. Her truck was parked about 2 miles behind her, and the snow was getting deeper every minute. Sarah had her radio, GPS device, and emergency kit with her. She always carried these things when she went out alone. The radio crackled with static, but she could not hear any clear voices. The storm was probably blocking the signals. As she walked between 2 large rocks, the wind suddenly got much stronger. Snow blew into her eyes, and she had to stop and cover her face. When she looked up again, she realized she could not see the path anymore. Everything looked the same, just white snow and dark trees. Sarah felt a small worry in her stomach. She had been in situations like this before, but it never got easier. She pulled out her GPS device, but the screen showed an error message. The storm was blocking the satellite signals too. She decided to find shelter and wait for the storm to calm down. Sarah looked around and saw a group of pine trees that were close together. The thick branches would protect her from some of the wind and snow. As she walked toward the trees, something caught her eye. There was a dark shape near the biggest tree. At first, Sarah thought it might be a large rock or a fallen log. But as she got closer, her heart started beating faster. It was not a rock. It was an animal. Sarah moved carefully toward the shape. She did not want to scare whatever it was. As she got closer, she could see it was a horse. The animal was lying on its side in the snow, not moving. Sarah's training kicked in. She approached slowly, speaking in a soft voice. "Easy there," she said, even though she was not sure if the horse was alive. "I am here to help." When she was just a few feet away, the horse lifted its head slightly. Sarah could see the animal's eyes, and they looked tired and scared. The horse was breathing, but the breaths were slow and weak. Sarah knelt down in the snow next to the horse. She could see it was a female, and something else made her gasp. The horse was very pregnant. Her belly was large and round, which meant the baby horse would be born soon. The horse's coat was covered with ice and snow. Sarah could see that the animal had been in the storm for a long time. The horse's lips were almost blue from the cold, and she was shaking. Sarah had never seen a horse in this part of the park before. Horses were not allowed to run free in Yellowstone. This horse must have come from somewhere else, but how did she get here? And why was she alone? Sarah pulled off her thick gloves and gently touched the horse's neck. The animal's skin was very cold, colder than it should be. Sarah knew that horses could die from being too cold, just like people. The horse looked at Sarah with big dark eyes. Sarah felt like the animal was asking for help. She had to do something, but what? The horse was too big and heavy for Sarah to move by herself, and with the storm getting worse, no help would come soon. Sarah tried her radio again. "This is Ranger Mitchell," she said into the device. "I need help. I found an injured pregnant horse in Sector 7, but only static came back through the speaker." She looked at her phone, but there were no signal bars. The storm had cut off all communication. Sarah was alone with a dying horse that was about to have a baby. Sarah made a quick decision. She could not leave the horse to die in the snow. She opened her emergency backpack and pulled out a silver emergency blanket. It was thin but designed to keep body heat in. Very carefully, Sarah spread the blanket over the horse's body. The horse did not fight her, which worried Sarah even more. Healthy horses usually did not like strangers touching them. Next, Sarah took out her small camping shovel and started digging the snow away from around the horse. The work was hard, and soon Sarah was breathing heavily, but she kept digging until she had made a clear area around the animal. Sarah pulled out her emergency shelter, a small orange tarp. She tied one end to a tree branch and used her backpack to hold down the other end. It was not much, but it would keep some of the snow off both of them. Under the tarp, Sarah could get a better look at the horse. The animal was beautiful, with a golden brown coat under all the ice. But Sarah could see that the horse was in bad shape. She was too thin, and there were cuts on her legs. Sarah opened her first aid kit. She had bandages and medicine, but these were made for people, not horses. Still, she cleaned the cuts on the horse's legs and covered them with bandages. As Sarah worked, she talked to the horse in a calm voice. "You're going to be okay," she said. "I'm going to take care of you and your baby." The horse seemed to understand. She stopped shaking as much and let Sarah touch her without pulling away. Sarah looked at the sky. The snow was falling even harder now, and the wind was getting stronger. She knew that she and the horse could be stuck here for hours, maybe even all night. Sarah made another decision. She would stay with the horse no matter what. She could not save the animal by herself, but she would not let her die alone. Sarah sat down next to the horse and shared her own body heat. She ate an energy bar from her pack and gave the horse some water from her bottle. The horse drank a little bit, which was a good sign. As the afternoon turned into evening, Sarah knew that this would be the longest night of her life. She did not know it yet, but this night would change everything. Not just for her and the horse, but for people around the world. The temperature was dropping fast. Sarah looked at the small thermometer on her backpack. It showed 20 degrees below zero. At this temperature, both she and the horse could freeze to death in just a few hours. Sarah knew she had to make the horse warmer, but she was running out of ideas. She had already given the animal her emergency blanket and built a shelter. But it was not enough. The horse was still shaking, and her breathing was getting slower. Sarah could see clouds of breath coming from the horse's nose, but they were getting smaller. This was a very bad sign. Sarah tried her radio one more time. She held it up high and spoke loudly. "Emergency! This is Park Ranger Sarah Mitchell. I need immediate help. I have a pregnant horse that is dying from cold in Sector 7. For a moment, she heard a voice through the static. "Sarah, this is base. Can barely. I need a helicopter." Sarah shouted into the radio. "Medical emergency." But then the voice was gone, and only static remained. Sarah realized that even if someone heard her, no helicopter could fly in this storm. The wind was too strong, and the snow was too thick. Sarah looked at the horse again. The animal's eyes were starting to close. Sarah knew she was losing the fight against time. Then Sarah remembered something from her wilderness training. When people were freezing, the best way to warm them was with body heat from another person. Maybe the same thing would work for a horse. Sarah crawled under the emergency blanket with the horse. She pressed her back against the animal's large belly and wrapped her arms around the horse's neck. It felt strange, but Sarah could feel some of her own warmth moving into the horse's body. The horse seemed to like this. She stopped shaking as much, and her breathing got a little stronger. Sarah decided to stay like this even though it was uncomfortable. Hours passed. Sarah dozed off and on, but she made sure to check on the horse every few minutes. She gave the animal more water and ate another energy bar herself. She had to keep her own strength up if she was going to help the horse. Around midnight, Sarah felt something different. The horse's belly was getting hard, then soft, then hard again. Sarah had grown up on a farm, and she knew what this meant. The horse was starting to have her baby. Sarah's heart began beating fast. She had seen animals give birth before, but only when there was a veterinarian to help. She was just a park ranger. She knew basic first aid for people, but she did not know how to help a horse have a baby. But Sarah also knew that she was the only help this horse had. If the baby was going to be born, Sarah would have to help deliver it. Sarah got out from under the blanket and looked at the horse more carefully. The animal was breathing harder now, and she was moving her legs like she was trying to get comfortable. Sarah remembered that her uncle had been a farmer. When she was little, he had shown her how cows gave birth. Maybe horses were similar. Sarah took off her coat and rolled up her sleeves, even though the cold air made her skin hurt. She washed her hands with bottled water and put on the medical gloves from her first aid kit. The horse was definitely in labor now. Every few minutes, her whole body would tense up, and she would make soft groaning sounds. Sarah had read once that horse babies usually came quickly once labor started. Sarah tried to remember everything she could about animal births. The baby should come out head first. If something went wrong, the mother and baby could both die. Sarah positioned herself behind the horse and waited. She talked to the animal in a calm voice. "It's okay, girl. You're doing great. I'm here to help you." After about an hour, Sarah could see something happening. She could see part of the baby horse starting to come out. But something was wrong. Sarah could see what looked like a back leg instead of a head. Sarah's stomach dropped. She knew that if the baby was coming out backwards, it could get stuck. This was very dangerous for both the mother and baby. Sarah tried to remember what her uncle had told her about this situation. She would have to try to turn the baby around, or at least help it come out safely. Very carefully, Sarah reached toward the baby horse. The mother horse made a loud sound, but she did not try to kick Sarah. It was like she knew Sarah was trying to help. Sarah could feel the baby's legs. They were slippery and warm. She tried to be very gentle as she helped guide them out. The work was hard and Sarah was sweating even in the freezing cold. Her arms were tired and her hands were getting numb, but she could not stop now. After what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, the baby horse's legs came out all the way. Then Sarah could see the body coming. Sarah helped pull, gently as the mother horse pushed. The baby was bigger than Sarah had expected, and it was hard work for both of them. Finally, the baby horse came out all the way. It landed in the snow with a soft thud. Sarah quickly picked it up and moved it closer to its mother. But the baby was not moving. It was not breathing. Sarah felt panic rising in her chest. She had delivered the baby, but now it might be dead. All of this work would be for nothing. Sarah remembered learning about CPR for people. Maybe she could do something similar for the baby horse. She cleared the baby's nose and mouth with her fingers, removing fluid and snow. Then she breathed gently into the baby's nose like she would for a human baby. After a few breaths, the baby horse suddenly moved. It coughed and started breathing on its own. Sarah had never been so happy to hear an animal make noise. The mother horse lifted her head and looked at her baby. She made soft nickering sounds and tried to lick the baby clean. Sarah sat back in the snow, exhausted. She had done it. She had helped deliver a baby horse in the middle of a blizzard, and both mother and baby were alive. But as Sarah looked more closely at the baby horse, she noticed something strange. This baby did not look like any horse she had ever seen before. Its markings were unusual, and something about its size and shape seemed different. Sarah felt confused, but she was too tired to think about it right now. The important thing was that both horses were alive. She covered them both with the emergency blanket and settled in to wait for morning. She did not know it yet, but what she had just seen would shock everyone who heard about it. Sarah woke up when she felt something warm against her arm. The baby horse had crawled closer to her during the night looking for warmth. The sun was starting to rise and the storm had finally stopped. Sarah stretched her sore muscles and looked around. Everything was covered in fresh white snow that sparkled in the morning light. The world looked peaceful and beautiful, very different from the scary night they had just survived. The mother horse was awake too. She was licking her baby and making soft sounds. Both horses looked much better in the daylight. The mother's eyes were brighter, and the baby was trying to stand up on its wobbly legs. Sarah smiled as she watched the baby horse try to walk. It kept falling down in the snow, but it would get back up and try again. Baby horses usually stood up within an hour of being born, but this little one had been born in very difficult conditions. As Sarah watched the baby more carefully, she started to notice the strange things she had seen the night before. The baby horse was smaller than most newborn horses. It was about the right length, but it seemed more delicate, with thinner legs and a smaller head. But what really caught Sarah's attention was the baby's coat. Most baby horses were born with simple colors, brown, black, or white. This baby had a coat that was golden with silver streaks running through it. The pattern was so unusual that it almost looked painted on. Sarah had worked around horses when she was younger, and she had never seen markings like these. The silver streaks were perfectly straight and even, running from the baby's neck down to its legs. It was beautiful, but also very strange. The baby's face was unusual too. It had a white stripe down the center, which was normal. But there were also small white spots around its eyes that formed an almost perfect pattern. Sarah thought they looked like stars. Sarah pulled out her camera and took several pictures. She wanted to document everything in case someone asked her questions later. As she looked through the camera lens, she noticed something else strange about the baby horse. Its ears were longer and more pointed than normal horse ears. They almost looked like the ears of a different kind of animal, and its tail was thicker and fluffier than most horse tails. Sarah started to wonder if this was really a normal horse at all. Maybe it was a mix between a horse and something else. But what other animal could it be mixed with? As the morning got brighter, Sarah decided to take a closer look at the mother horse too. She had been so worried about keeping the horse alive that she had not really examined her carefully. The mother horse was standing up now, eating some of the hay that Sarah had found in her emergency pack. In the daylight, Sarah could see that this horse was also very unusual. The mother was smaller than most horses, but she was built differently too. Her neck was longer and more curved. Her legs were thin but looked very strong. Her head was shaped differently than any horse Sarah had seen before. But the most surprising thing was the mother horse's coat. Under all the ice and dirt from the storm, her coat was a shiny golden color. When the sun hit it, it almost seemed to glow. Sarah had heard of horses with golden coats, but she had never seen one that looked like this. Sarah walked around the mother horse, taking more pictures. As she moved to the horse's left side, she saw something that made her stop and stare. There was a mark on the horse's shoulder. At first, Sarah thought it might be a scar from an injury, but as she looked closer, she realized it was a brand, a mark that had been burned into the horse's skin to show who owned her. Sarah had seen cattle brands before, but this was different. The mark was not made of simple lines and shapes like most brands. It looked like letters, but they were not in English. The letters looked foreign, maybe Russian or Arabic. Sarah took several close-up pictures of the brand. She also noticed that the mark looked old. The hair had grown back over it, which meant it had been made at least a year ago. Sarah felt more confused than ever. How did a horse with a foreign brand end up pregnant in the middle of Yellowstone National Park? Horses could not just wander into the park from other countries. Someone had to bring them here. But why would someone bring a pregnant horse to one of the most remote parts of the park? And why would they leave her there to die in a storm? Sarah tried her radio again. This time she heard a clear voice on the other end. "Sarah, thank God, we've been trying to reach you all night. Are you okay?" It was Tom Rodriguez, another park ranger and one of Sarah's closest friends. "I'm fine, Tom," Sarah said into the radio, "but I need help. I found a pregnant horse yesterday and she had her baby during the storm. They're both alive, but they need medical attention." There was silence on the radio for a moment. Then Tom's voice came back, sounding confused. "A horse? Sarah, there are no horses allowed in that part of the park. Are you sure it's not an elk or a deer?" "Tom, I know what a horse looks like," Sarah said. "And I helped deliver the baby myself. Can you send a helicopter with a veterinarian?" Okay, Tom said. "We'll send help. But Sarah, this is really strange. How did a horse get way out there?" "I don't know," Sarah said. "But Tom, there's something else. These horses look different. I think they might be a special breed or something. The baby has markings I've never seen before." Sarah heard Tom talking to someone else in the background. Then he came back on the radio. "A helicopter is on the way. Dr. Elena Rodriguez from the animal hospital is coming with them. She knows about horses." "Thank you," Sarah said. "We'll be waiting." Sarah put down the radio and looked at the two horses. The baby was finally standing up steadily and was trying to nurse from its mother. The mother horse was letting the baby drink her milk, which was a good sign that she was feeling better. As Sarah watched them, She felt a strange feeling that this was just the beginning of something much bigger. She had found 2 horses that did not belong in the park. They had unusual markings and foreign brands, and they had survived in conditions that should have killed them. Sarah had delivered many animals to safety during her years as a ranger, but she had never felt like she was part of a mystery before. The sound of helicopter blades in the distance interrupted her thoughts. Help was finally coming. Soon, experts would be able to tell her what kind of horses these were and how they had gotten here. But Sarah had a feeling that the answers would be more surprising than anything she could imagine. As the helicopter got closer, the mother horse became nervous. She moved protectively in front of her baby and watched the sky with worried eyes. Sarah walked over to the horses and spoke to them in a calm voice. "It's okay," she said. "These people are here to help you just like I did." The mother horse looked at Sarah and seemed to relax a little. After everything they had been through together, the horse trusted her. Sarah realized that no matter what happened next, she would never forget this night. She had saved 2 lives, but something told her that these horses had a story that would change her life too. The helicopter landed in a clearing about 50 yards away from where Sarah and the horses were waiting. The noise was very loud, and the baby horse pressed close to its mother. Sarah kept talking to them in a soothing voice to keep them calm. Dr. Elena Rodriguez jumped out of the helicopter before it had completely landed. She was a small woman with dark hair tied back in a ponytail. She carried a large bag of veterinary supplies and moved quickly through the snow toward Sarah. "Where are they?" Dr. Rodriguez called out as she approached. Sarah pointed toward the trees where the horses were sheltered. "Over here. The mother seems stable, but I'm worried about the baby. It was a difficult birth." When Dr. Rodriguez saw the horses, she stopped, walking, and stared. Her mouth fell open and she did not speak for several seconds. "What is it?" Sarah asked. "Are they hurt worse than I thought?" Dr. Rodriguez shook her head slowly. "No, it's not that. Sarah, do you know what kind of horses these are?" "I was hoping you could tell me," Sarah said. "They don't look like any horses I've seen before." Dr. Rodriguez moved closer to the mother horse, speaking softly in Spanish. The horse seemed to understand and allowed the veterinarian to examine her. "This is incredible," Dr. Rodriguez said as she checked the horse's heart rate and breathing. "Sarah, this is an Acalteque horse. They're one of the rarest breeds in the world." "Acal what?" Sarah asked. "Acalteque," Dr. Rodriguez repeated. "They come from a country called Turkmenistan in Central Asia. There are only about 6,000 of these horses left in the entire world." Sarah felt confused. "Central Asia? That's thousands of miles from here. How did she get to Wyoming?" Dr. Rodriguez did not answer right away. She was busy examining the baby horse, checking its legs and listening to its heartbeat with a stethoscope. "The baby seems healthy," she said finally. "But Sarah, this is even more strange than I thought. Look at these markings." Dr. Rodriguez pointed to the silver streaks in the baby's golden coat. "This coloring is called metallic. It's what Acalteque horses are famous for. But this baby has the most perfect metallic coat I've ever seen." Sarah watched as the veterinarian took pictures of both horses with a professional camera. "Why is that important?" "Because horses with coats like this are worth a lot of money," Dr. Rodriguez explained. "A horse like this baby, with perfect bloodlines, could be worth $50,000 or more." Sarah felt shocked. $50,000? For a baby horse? "Maybe more," Dr. Rodriguez said. "Acalteque horses are considered living treasures in their home countries. They're so rare that some people call them the golden horses of heaven." Dr. Rodriguez continued examining the mother horse. When she got to the horse's left shoulder, she stopped and called Sarah over. "Look at this," Dr. Rodriguez said, pointing to the brand mark. "Can you read these letters?" Sarah looked closely at the mark. "I thought they might be Russian letters, but I'm not sure." Dr. Rodriguez pulled out her phone and took a close-up picture of the brand. "I think you're right. These look like Cyrillic letters, the alphabet they use in Russia and some other countries." "What do you think it says?" Sarah asked. "I don't know, but I have a friend who speaks Russian. I'll send her this picture and ask her to translate it. As Dr. Rodriguez worked, two other people arrived from the helicopter. One was Tom Rodriguez, Sarah's fellow ranger. The other was a man Sarah did not recognize, wearing a suit and carrying a briefcase. "Sarah!" Tom called out as he hurried through the snow. "Are you okay? We were so worried about you." "I'm fine," Sarah said, hugging her friend. "But Tom, you need to see these horses. They're not from around here." The man in the suit introduced himself as Agent David Park from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. "I came as soon as I heard about the horses," he said. "We need to document everything carefully." Agent Park began taking his own pictures and writing notes in a small notebook. He seemed very serious and asked Sarah many questions about exactly where and when she had found the horses. "Have you noticed anything else unusual about them?" Agent Park asked. Sarah thought for a moment. "Well, the mother horse was very weak when I found her. She looked like she had been traveling for a long time, and she seemed scared of people at first. But then she trusted me." Dr. Rodriguez looked up from examining the baby horse. "Agent Park, I think you should see this." She led him over to the mother horse and showed him something behind the horse's ear. Sarah moved closer to see what they were looking at. "What is that?" Sarah asked. "It's a microchip," Dr. Rodriguez explained. "Many expensive horses have them, like identification tags. The chip contains information about the horse's owners and medical history." Agent Park pulled out a small electronic device that looked like a calculator. "This is a chip reader," he explained. "Let's see what this chip tells us." He held the device near the horse's ear, and it made a beeping sound. Numbers and letters appeared on the small screen. Agent Park stared at the screen for a long moment. Then he looked at Dr. Rodriguez and Sarah with a very serious expression. "We have a problem," he said quietly. "What kind of problem?" Sarah asked. Agent Park showed them the screen. "This chip is registered to a breeding facility in Kazakhstan. But according to this information, this horse was reported stolen 2 years ago." Sarah felt her stomach drop. "Stolen?" "The horse's name is Zvezda," Agent Park continued. "It means star in Russian. She was taken from the Almaty International Breeding Center, along with 3 other valuable horses." Dr. Rodriguez looked shocked. "Are you saying this horse was brought here illegally?" "That's exactly what I'm saying," Agent Park replied. "And if she was stolen in Kazakhstan and ended up in Wyoming, someone transported her across international borders without proper documentation. That's a federal crime." Sarah looked at Zvezda and her baby. "But why would someone bring a stolen horse to the middle of Yellowstone and then abandon her?" Agent Park closed his notebook and put it in his briefcase. "That's what we need to find out. This isn't just about a lost horse anymore. This could be part of a much bigger criminal operation." Tom looked confused. "What do you mean?" "International animal trafficking," Agent Park explained. "Stolen horses moved across borders sold to private buyers who don't ask questions. It's a multi-million-dollar business." Sarah felt angry. "So someone stole Zvezda, brought her thousands of miles from home, and then left her to die in a snowstorm?" "That's what it looks like," Agent Park said. "But the good news is that you saved her and her baby. Now they can help us find the people who did this." Dr. Rodriguez stood up and brushed snow off her knees. "What happens to them now?" "First, we need to get them to a proper facility where they can recover," Agent Park said. "Then we'll contact the authorities in Kazakhstan and start an international investigation." Sarah looked at Zvezda and the baby horse. In less than 24 hours, her simple winter patrol had turned into an international crime case. She had thought she was just saving 2 animals from a storm. Now she realized she had uncovered something much bigger and more dangerous than she could have imagined. As the team prepared to transport the horses to safety, Sarah wondered what other secrets this case would reveal. She had a feeling that this was just the beginning of a very complicated story. 3 days later, Sarah sat in a conference room at the Rocky Mountain Animal Hospital in Billings, Montana. Zvezda and her baby, who everyone was now calling Star because of the markings around her eyes, were recovering in a special barn behind the hospital. Around the table sat Dr. Rodriguez, Agent Park, and 2 new people Sarah had never met before. One was Agent Lisa Chen from the FBI, and the other was a man named Colonel Dmitry Volkov, who had flown in from Kazakhstan. Agent Chen opened a thick folder and spread papers across the table. Sarah, what you discovered has opened up one of the biggest international animal trafficking cases we've seen in years. Sarah felt overwhelmed. I still can't believe all of this started because I found a horse in the snow. Colonel Volkov spoke with a heavy accent. Ms. Mitchell, you have done more than save 2 horses. You have helped us find animals that my country has been searching for since they disappeared. Dr. Rodriguez looked up from a computer screen. The DNA tests came back this morning. Star is not just any Akal Teke foal. Her father was a horse named Golden Wind, one of the most valuable breeding stallions in Central Asia. How valuable? Agent Park asked. Golden Wind's offspring usually sell for between $75,000 and $100,000 each, Dr. Rodriguez replied. Star could be worth even more because her markings are so perfect. Agent Chen showed Sarah a map with red lines drawn across several countries. We've been tracking this trafficking ring for 3 years. They steal valuable horses from breeding facilities in Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan, then smuggle them into the United States through Mexico. Sarah studied the map. How do they move horses across so many borders without getting caught? Fake documents, Colonel Volkov explained. They make papers that say the horses are being transported for legitimate breeding programs. By the time anyone discovers the truth, the horses have disappeared into private ranches. Agent Park pointed to several locations marked on the map. We think the criminals have been using a network of corrupt border officials and dishonest transporters. Money changes hands, and suddenly no one asks questions about the paperwork. But why was Zvezda abandoned in the park? Sarah asked. If she was so valuable, why didn't they take care of her? Dr. Rodriguez looked sad. Because she was pregnant, and they couldn't control when the baby would be born. Pregnant horses are harder to transport and more likely to get sick during long trips. Agent Chen added, we think something went wrong with their plan. Maybe they were worried about getting caught, so they decided to cut their losses and abandon her. Colonel Volkov shook his head angrily. These criminals do not care about the animals. To them, horses are just money. When a horse becomes inconvenient, they throw it away like garbage. Sarah felt angry too. So they just left her to die in the wilderness. That's exactly what they did, Agent Park said. But they didn't count on an experienced park ranger finding her. Dr. Rodriguez turned her computer screen so everyone could see it. I've been researching the microchip data. Zvezda was not the only horse stolen from the Almaty facility. 3 others were taken the same night. Have you found the other horses? Sarah asked. One was recovered in Texas last year, Agent Chen replied. The owners thought they had bought it legally, but the horse's microchip revealed the truth. The other 2 are still missing. Colonel Volkov pulled out his own folder and showed Sarah pictures of beautiful horses. These are Zvezda's parents and siblings. The breeding program she came from has been developing perfect bloodlines for over 20 years. Sarah looked at the photos. All the horses had the same golden coats with metallic shine. They're beautiful. It must have been devastating when they were stolen. It was more than devastating, Colonel Volkov said. It was like losing family members. These horses represent hundreds of years of careful breeding. Each one is unique and irreplaceable. Agent Chen leaned forward. Sarah, we need your help with the investigation. You're the only person who has been in direct contact with Zvezda. Sometimes animals can provide clues that help us solve crimes. What kind of clues? Sarah asked. Dr. Rodriguez explained. Horses remember places and people. Zvezda might react differently to certain sounds, smells, or even accents. These reactions could help us identify her captors. Agent Park opened another file. We've also been analyzing the route she must have taken to get to Wyoming. Based on her condition when you found her, we think she had been traveling for at least a week. Sarah thought about this. A week? But how could someone transport a pregnant horse for a week without anyone noticing? That's what we're trying to figure out, Agent Chen said. We think they might have been moving her in a livestock trailer, stopping at remote locations to rest. Colonel Volkov showed Sarah a photograph of tire tracks in mud. Local police found these tracks at a rest stop about 60 miles from where you found Zvezda. The tracks match a specific type of heavy trailer. We're checking all the truck stops and feed stores in the area, Agent Park added. Someone had to buy hay and water for her during the journey. Dr. Rodriguez looked at her watch. Speaking of Zvezda, I should check on her and Star. Would you like to see them, Sarah? Sarah nodded, eagerly. She had been worried about the horses since they were transported to the hospital. The group walked outside to the barn behind the hospital. It was a modern facility with large, clean stalls and plenty of space for the horses to move around. Zvezda was in the largest stall, and Star was right beside her. Both horses looked much better than they had in the snow. Zvezda's coat was shiny and clean, and Star was running around playfully. When Zvezda saw Sarah, she walked over to the stall door and made soft nickering sounds. Sarah reached out and petted the horse's nose. She remembers you, Dr. Rodriguez said with a smile. Horses never forget someone who helped them. Star came over too, curious about the visitors. The foal was growing quickly and already showed signs of the same metallic coat that made Acalteque horses so special. As Sarah watched the horses, Agent Chen's phone rang. She answered it and walked away from the group to talk privately. Buenos días. She came back. Her expression was serious. That was our office in Washington. We just got some new information that changes everything. Agent Park looked concerned. What kind of information? The FBI has been working with international partners to track financial records related to horse trafficking, Agent Chen explained. They found bank transfers that suggest this operation is much bigger than we thought. Colonel Volkov frowned. How much bigger? We're talking about hundreds of horses stolen over the past 5 years, Agent Chen said, and the total value could be over $10 million. Sarah felt shocked. $10 million? That's just the beginning, Agent Chen continued. The money trail leads to several countries and involves people at very high levels. Government officials, wealthy collectors, even some criminal organizations. Dr. Rodriguez looked worried. What does this mean for Zvezda and Star? Agent Park answered, It means they're not just stolen horses anymore. They're key evidence in a major international crime investigation. And that makes them very valuable. To some very dangerous people. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold Montana air. Are you saying the criminals might try to get them back? Agent Chen nodded gravely. We're already increasing security around the facility. But Sarah, I have to warn you, you might be in danger too. Me? Why? Because you're the person who found them, Agent Park explained. If the criminals think you know something that could help identify them, they might see you as a threat. Sarah looked at Zvezda and Star, who were peacefully eating hay in their warm stall. She had saved their lives, but now it seemed like her own life might be in danger because of it. Colonel Volkov put a hand on Sarah's shoulder. Do not worry. We will protect you and the horses. These criminals have hurt enough innocent creatures. As the group prepared to leave the barn, Sarah realized that her simple rescue mission had become something much more complicated and dangerous than she had ever imagined. 2 weeks after finding Zvezda, Sarah found herself in the FBI headquarters in Denver, looking at a wall covered with photographs, maps, and documents. Agent Chen had asked her to come in to help with the investigation that was now involving law enforcement agencies from 6 different countries. This is incredible, Sarah said, staring at the wall. I had no idea that finding one horse could lead to all of this. Agent Chen pointed to a large map in the center of the wall. What you found was just the tip of the iceberg. We've discovered that this trafficking ring has been operating for over 8 years. The map showed red lines connecting cities across Asia, Europe, and North America. Each line represented a route the criminals had used to move stolen horses. Agent Park joined them at the wall. The operation is more sophisticated than we initially thought. They have people working at border crossings, shipping companies, and even some legitimate horse breeding facilities. Sarah studied the photographs on the wall. Some showed beautiful horses like Zvezda, while others showed men in expensive suits and luxury cars. Who are these people? The leaders of the trafficking ring, Agent Chen explained. The man in the center is Viktor Petrov, a Russian businessman who lives in Dubai. He's been buying stolen horses and selling them to wealthy collectors who don't ask questions about where they came from. Agent Park pointed to another photograph. This is Maria Santos, who runs the transportation network. She has trucks and trailers moving horses all across Mexico and the southwestern United States. Sarah looked at a photo of a woman with short, black hair and expensive jewelry. How do they avoid getting caught? Money, Agent Chen said simply. They pay border guards to look the other way. They bribe officials to approve fake paperwork. They even pay veterinarians to give the horses new identity chips. A new voice joined the conversation. They also use violence to keep people quiet. Sarah turned to see Colonel Volkov walking toward them. He looked tired, like he had been traveling for a long time. Colonel, Agent Chen said, I didn't know you were coming back. I have new information from Kazakhstan, Colonel Volkov replied, and it is not good news. He pulled out a folder and showed them photographs of a burned building. This is what remains of the Almaty breeding facility where Zvezda was stolen. 2 days ago, someone set fire to it. Sarah felt shocked. Was anyone hurt? Thankfully, no, Colonel Volkov said. But all the records about the stolen horses were destroyed. Someone did not want us to have that information. Agent Park studied the photographs. This shows how desperate they're getting. Destroying evidence means they know we're getting close to catching them. Colonel Volkov nodded. But there is more. The night before the fire, someone broke into the facility manager's house and threatened his family. They told him to stop cooperating with the investigation. Sarah felt a chill. Are you saying these people will hurt innocent families to protect their criminal business? They have already proven they will abandon pregnant horses to die in snowstorms, Colonel Volkov replied. Threatening families is not beyond them. Agent Chen led them to a conference table where several other people were waiting. Sarah recognized Dr. Rodriguez, but the others were strangers. Sarah, I'd like you to meet some of our international partners, Agent Chen said. This is Inspector James Wilson from Interpol, Detective Sandra Muller from German police, and Agent Roberto Silva from Mexican authorities. Each person shook Sarah's hand and thanked her for her role in uncovering the trafficking ring. Sarah felt overwhelmed by all the attention. Inspector Wilson opened a laptop computer. Ms. Mitchell, your discovery has helped us connect crimes across multiple continents. Would you like to see what we've learned? The computer screen showed a timeline with dates and locations. This investigation now involves agencies from the United States, Canada, Mexico, Germany, Russia, Kazakhstan, and Turkmenistan, Inspector Wilson explained. Detective Muller pointed to several entries on the timeline. We've identified at least 37 horses that were stolen and trafficked over the past 5 years. The total value is over $12 million. Sarah whistled softly. $12 million? Agent Silva added. And that's just what we know about. There are probably many more horses that haven't been reported missing yet. Dr. Rodriguez looked up from some papers she was reading. The good news is that Zvezda and Star are helping us understand how the criminals operate. We've learned a lot from examining them. What have you learned? Sarah asked. The veterinary care they received during transport was minimal, Dr. Rodriguez explained. Zvezda was malnourished and had untreated injuries. This suggests the criminals don't invest much money in keeping the horses healthy during transport. Agent Chen pointed to a chart on the wall. That tells us they're focused on quick profits, not long-term horse care. They steal valuable horses, move them as quickly as possible, and sell them before anyone can track them down. Colonel Volkov added, this also means they probably have a network of buyers who are willing to purchase horses with questionable documentation. Inspector Wilson pulled up a new screen on his laptop. We've been tracking financial records and we've found some interesting patterns. Large cash payments to shipping companies, unusual veterinary bills, and purchases of horse transportation equipment. Detective Muller showed Sarah a photograph of a luxury ranch. This is a property in Texas where we believe some of the stolen horses have been kept. The owner claims he bought them legally, but the paperwork doesn't match our records. Are you going to arrest him? Sarah asked. We're still gathering evidence, Agent Silva replied. We want to make sure we can prove everything in court before we make arrests. Agent Park looked at his watch. Speaking of evidence, we have a video conference scheduled with authorities in Dubai. They've been investigating Viktor Petrov's business operations. The group gathered around a large screen as Agent Chen connected the video call. A man in a police uniform appeared on the screen, speaking from what looked like a modern office building. "This is Captain Ahmed Hassan from Dubai Police," the man said. "We have some significant developments in the Petrov investigation." Captain Hassan held up several documents. "We executed a search warrant on Petrov's offices yesterday. We found contracts for purchasing horses from sources that we now know were stolen." Sarah watched as the captain showed pages covered with photographs of horses and financial information. "More importantly," Captain Hassan continued, "we found communications between Petrov and his partners in other countries. They discuss specific horses by name, including Zvezda." Agent Chen leaned forward. "What do the communications say about Zvezda?" Captain Hassan read from a document. "One message from 6 months ago says, 'The golden mare is becoming difficult to transport. Consider disposal if pregnancy interferes with timeline.'" Sarah felt angry. Disposal? They were talking about killing her? "It appears so," Captain Hassan confirmed. "Another message from 3 months ago says winter transport to northern location approved. Local disposal authorized if necessary." Colonel Volkov slammed his hand on the table. "They planned to abandon her in the wilderness all along. They never intended for her to survive." Dr. Rodriguez looked sad. Zvezda was just a business problem to them. When she became inconvenient, they decided to get rid of her. Agent Chen made notes as Captain Hassan continued reading from the documents. "We also found evidence that they have been planning to shut down the entire operation. It seems they knew law enforcement was getting close." Inspector Wilson asked, "Does that mean they're going to stop trafficking horses? Or it means they're going to destroy evidence and disappear?" Agent Silva replied grimly. Sarah thought about Zvezda and Star, who were safe and healthy at the animal hospital. What happens now? How do you catch people who are in so many different countries? Agent Chen smiled for the first time that day. "That's the beauty of international cooperation. We're coordinating arrests simultaneously across multiple countries. They won't be able to run away from all of us at the same time." Colonel Volkov looked determined. "Justice will finally come for these criminals, and it all started because one brave ranger refused to let a horse die in the snow." Sarah felt proud but also worried. "Are Zvezda and Star still in danger?" "They're under 24-hour security," Agent Park assured her. "And soon the people who threatened them will be in prison where they belong." As the meeting continued, Sarah realized that her simple act of kindness had started something much bigger than she could have imagined. But she also knew that it was worth it to protect innocent animals from cruel people who saw them only as money. 6 months after finding Zvezda in the snow, Sarah sat in a federal courthouse in Denver, wearing her best suit and feeling very nervous. Today was the day she would testify in the trial against Viktor Petrov and his criminal organization. The courthouse was full of people. There were FBI agents, international investigators, reporters, and even some of the wealthy people who had unknowingly bought stolen horses. Sarah had never been in such an important legal proceeding before. Agent Chen sat next to Sarah in the front row. "Remember, just tell the truth about what happened that night," she whispered. "The lawyers might try to confuse you, but stick to the facts." Sarah nodded, but her hands were still shaking. She looked across the courtroom at Viktor Petrov, who was sitting at a table with 3 expensive lawyers. He was a large man with gray hair and cold eyes. He did not look sorry for what he had done. The prosecutor, a woman named Jennifer Walsh, stood up to address the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about greed, cruelty, and international crime. The defendants stole irreplaceable animals, transported them across multiple borders, and abandoned them to die when they became inconvenient." Sarah listened as Prosecutor Walsh explained how the investigation had uncovered a criminal network that stretched across 6 countries. Charts and photographs were displayed on large screens, showing the routes the criminals had used and the horses they had stolen. "The evidence will show that these defendants treated living animals like cargo. Prosecutor Walsh continued. When a pregnant horse named Zvezda became difficult to transport, they dumped her in the wilderness during a deadly blizzard. One of Petrov's lawyers, a thin man in an expensive suit, stood up for the defense opening statement. My client is a legitimate businessman who was deceived by others, he said. Mr. Petrov believed all horses he purchased were legally obtained. He is a victim of fraud, not a criminal. Sarah felt angry listening to this. The evidence clearly showed that Petrov knew the horses were stolen. When it was time for Sarah to testify, Prosecutor Walsh called her to the witness stand. Sarah walked slowly to the front of the courtroom, feeling like everyone was staring at her. Please state your name and occupation for the record, Prosecutor Walsh said. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm a park ranger at Yellowstone National Park, Sarah replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Prosecutor Walsh smiled encouragingly. Ms. Mitchell, can you tell the jury about the events of February 15th? Sarah took a deep breath and began, telling her story. She described the blizzard, finding Zvezda nearly dead in the snow and helping deliver Star during the storm. The courtroom was completely quiet as she spoke. What condition was the horse in when you found her? Prosecutor Walsh asked. She was almost dead, Sarah replied. She was severely malnourished, dehydrated, and suffering from hypothermia. She had cuts on her legs that looked infected. If I hadn't found her that night, both she and her baby would have died. Prosecutor Walsh showed Sarah photographs of Zvezda taken that night. Even though several months had passed, Sarah felt emotional seeing the pictures of the suffering horse. Ms. Mitchell, in your professional opinion as someone who works with wildlife, was this horse abandoned intentionally? Sarah looked directly at the jury. Absolutely. No one accidentally leaves a valuable pregnant horse in the middle of a wilderness area during a blizzard. Someone made a deliberate decision to abandon her there. When it was time for cross-examination, Petrov's lawyer tried to suggest that Sarah might have been mistaken about what she saw. Ms. Mitchell, isn't it possible that this horse simply wandered away from its owners during the storm? Sarah remained calm. No, sir. Zvezda had a foreign brand and a microchip showing she was stolen 2 years ago. Wild horses don't have microchips. The lawyer tried a different approach. How can you be certain my client had anything to do with abandoning this horse? Prosecutor Walsh stood up. Objection. The witness has not been qualified to testify about the defendant's specific involvement. Sustained, the judge said. Sarah's testimony lasted for 3 hours. When she was finished, she felt exhausted but proud that she had told Zvezda's story clearly and honestly. Over the next 2 weeks, the trial continued with testimony from many other witnesses. Dr. Rodriguez testified about Zvezda's medical condition and the value of Akhal-Teke horses. Colonel Volkov testified about the theft from the breeding facility in Kazakhstan. Agent Chen testified about the international investigation and the evidence found in Petrov's offices. Inspector Wilson from Interpol explained how the criminal network operated across multiple countries. One of the most powerful witnesses was Ahmed Nazarbayev, the manager of the breeding facility where Zvezda was stolen. He flew in from Kazakhstan to testify about the night of the theft. They came in the middle of the night with trucks and tranquilizer guns, he said through a translator. They knew exactly which horses to take. These were not random thieves. They had planned everything carefully. The prosecutor also called several people who had unknowingly bought stolen horses from Petrov's organization. They testified about being told the horses were legally imported and having proper documentation. I paid $85,000 for a horse I thought was legally purchased, said one buyer from Texas. When I learned the truth, I was horrified. I immediately contacted authorities and returned the horse. The defense tried to argue that Petrov was just a middleman who did not know the horses were stolen. But the evidence was overwhelming. The FBI had found emails, financial records, and phone calls proving that Petrov knew exactly what he was doing. During the trial, there was also a legal battle over what would happen to Zvezda and Star after the case ended. The original owners in Kazakhstan wanted them returned, but animal welfare groups argued that the stress of international transport could be harmful to the horses. Sarah found herself in the middle of this debate. During a break in the trial, she spoke with reporters outside the courthouse. These horses have been through enough trauma, Sarah said. They've been stolen, transported thousands of miles, abandoned to die, and now they're finally safe and healthy. I think we should focus on what's best for them, not on legal ownership. Colonel Volkov supported Sarah's position. While Kazakhstan would love to have Zvezda back, we agree that the welfare of the horses must come first, he said in a prepared statement. After much negotiation, all parties agreed that Zvezda and Star would remain permanently at a horse sanctuary in Montana. The sanctuary would provide them with proper care and protection for the rest of their lives. The trial ended with closing arguments from both sides. The prosecutor reminded the jury that the evidence clearly showed an international criminal conspiracy. The defense lawyer made one last attempt to portray Petrov as an innocent businessman. The jury deliberated for 2 days before reaching their verdict. When they returned to the courtroom, the foreman stood up to read the decision. We, the jury, find the defendant Viktor Petrov guilty on all counts of conspiracy, money laundering, and trafficking in stolen property. Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her. Justice had been served. Judge Maria Santos sentenced Petrov to 12 years in federal prison and ordered him to pay over $2 million in restitution to the victims. His co-conspirators received sentences ranging from 5 to 8 years. After the trial, Sarah visited Zvezda and Star at their new home at the Peaceful Meadows Horse Sanctuary outside of Bozeman, Montana. The horses were thriving in their large pasture, and Star had grown into a beautiful young horse with a perfect metallic coat. Thank you for saving us, Sarah whispered to Zvezda as she petted the horse's neck. She knew Zvezda could not understand her words, but she felt like the horse understood her heart. The sanctuary director, an elderly woman named Mary Johnson, joined Sarah at the fence. They're doing wonderfully, she said. Zvezda has become the mother figure for several other rescued horses, and Star is growing up to be a strong, healthy animal. Sarah smiled as she watched Star playing with other young horses in the pasture. I'm so glad they're safe. They're more than safe, Mary said. They're home. As Sarah drove away from the sanctuary, she reflected on everything that had happened since that snowy night in Yellowstone. A simple act of kindness had led to an international investigation, major arrests, and justice for many victims. But most importantly, 2 innocent animals were alive and happy because she had refused to give up on them when they needed help the most. 1 year after finding Zvezda in the snow, Sarah stood in front of a room full of park rangers, wildlife officers, and animal protection advocates. She was giving a speech at the National Wildlife Protection Conference in Washington, D.C. She never imagined that her rescue of 2 horses would lead to her becoming a national speaker on animal trafficking. When I found Zvezda that night, I thought I was just saving 1 horse, Sarah told the audience. I had no idea that her story would help save dozens of other animals and put international criminals in prison. The audience applauded as Sarah clicked to the next slide in her presentation. It showed a photograph of Zvezda and Star running together in their pasture at Peaceful Meadow Sanctuary. Today, Zvezda and Star are healthy and happy, Sarah continued. But their story represents something much larger, the need for all of us to work together to protect animals from criminals who see them only as money. In the front row, Agent Chen smiled proudly. She had become one of Sarah's closest friends during the investigation and trial. Next to her sat Dr. Rodriguez, who had written a book about the case called Golden Horses of Heaven. After Sarah's speech, she was approached by many people who wanted to hear more details about the case. One was a young woman named Jessica Martinez, who worked for an international animal welfare organization. Ms. Mitchell, your case has inspired new laws in several countries, Jessica said. Congress just passed the International Animal Trafficking Prevention Act, which makes it much easier for law enforcement to track stolen animals across borders. Sarah felt proud hearing this. What does the new law do exactly? It requires all valuable animals to have international identification chips that can be tracked by multiple countries, Jessica explained. It also increases penalties for animal trafficking and provides more funding for international investigations. Sarah was also approached by Colonel Volkov, who had flown in from Kazakhstan for the conference. He looked much happier than he had during the investigation. Sarah, I have wonderful news, he said with a big smile. The breeding facility in Almaty has been rebuilt. and it is better than ever before. They now have the most advanced security system in Central Asia. That's fantastic, Sarah replied. Are the horses safe? Very safe, Colonel Volkov confirmed. And we have started a new program to train law enforcement officers from different countries to recognize stolen horses. We call it the Zvezda program, in honor of our brave mare. Sarah felt touched that the program was named after the horse she had saved. Later that evening, Sarah attended a dinner hosted by the International Association of Wildlife Officers. She was surprised to learn that she was receiving a special award for her role in uncovering the trafficking ring. As she accepted the award, Sarah spoke about the importance of never giving up on animals in need. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness can lead to the biggest changes, she said. Zvezda taught me that every animal's life has value, and that we must always be willing to help when we can. The next day, Sarah flew back to Montana and drove directly to Peaceful Meadows Sanctuary. She had visited Zvezda and Star many times over the past year, but she never got tired of seeing them. Mary Johnson, the sanctuary director, met Sarah at the gate. You're going to love seeing them today, she said with excitement. Star has really grown and she's starting to show some of her mother's intelligence. As they walked toward the pasture, Mary continued, We've had visitors from all over the world come to see Zvezda and Star. A film crew from National Geographic was here last month making a documentary about their story. Sarah could see Zvezda grazing peacefully under a large oak tree. When the horse saw Sarah approaching, she lifted her head and walked toward the fence, making soft, nickering sounds. She always knows when you're coming, Mary said. I think horses have a special sense about people who have helped them. Star, now a beautiful yearling with a shimmering golden coat, came running over to join her mother. She was curious and friendly, showing none of the fear that often affected horses who had been mistreated. Hello, beautiful girl, Sarah said, reaching through the fence to pet Star's nose. Look how big you've gotten. Mary opened the gate and Sarah walked into the pasture. Both horses came over to her, and Zvezda rested her head on Sarah's shoulder in a gesture that looked like a hug. They remember everything, Mary said softly. Zvezda still gets nervous during snowstorms, but she seems to feel safe when Star is close to her. Sarah spent the afternoon with the horses, thinking about everything that had happened since that cold February night. The investigation had led to arrests in 6 countries. 37 stolen horses had been recovered and returned to their rightful owners or placed in sanctuaries. The criminal network that had operated for nearly a decade was completely destroyed. But perhaps most importantly, the case had raised awareness about animal trafficking around the world. New laws had been passed, international cooperation had been strengthened, and training programs had been established to help law enforcement officers recognize and investigate these crimes. As the sun began to set, Sarah prepared to leave the sanctuary. She always felt emotional saying goodbye to Zvezda and Star, even though she knew she would see them again soon. Thank you for everything, she whispered to Zvezda. You changed my life just as much as I changed yours. On her drive back to Yellowstone, Sarah's phone rang. It was Agent Chen calling from Washington. Sarah, I have some news that I think you'll want to hear, Agent Chen said. We just arrested the last member of the trafficking ring. Maria Santos was caught trying to cross the border from Mexico with 3 stolen horses. Sarah felt a sense of closure hearing this news. So it's really over? The original ring is completely shut down, Agent Chen confirmed. But Sarah, there's something else. The Department of Justice wants to offer you a job as a special consultant on animal trafficking cases. You would travel around the country training other law enforcement officers. Sarah was quiet for a moment, considering this unexpected opportunity. That sounds incredible, but I love being a park ranger. You could do both, Agent Chen explained. It would be part-time consulting work. You'd still be based at Yellowstone, but you'd also help other agencies when they have animal trafficking cases. Sarah smiled as she thought about this possibility. Can I think about it? Of course, but Sarah, your expertise could help save a lot more animals. After hanging up the phone, Sarah drove through the familiar landscape of Yellowstone National Park. She thought about all the animals she had helped during her career as a ranger. but none had impacted her life as much as Zvezda and Star. Case had taught her that sometimes the most important work happens when you least expect it. She had gone out for a routine winter patrol and ended up uncovering an international crime. More importantly, she had learned that one person really could make a difference. Her decision to stay with Zvezda during that blizzard had saved 2 lives and led to justice for many victims of animal trafficking. As Sarah pulled into her driveway, she made a decision about Agent Chen's job offer. She would accept the consulting position. If her experience could help other law enforcement officers save more animals like Zvezda and Star, then she had an obligation to share what she had learned. That night, Sarah sat on her porch looking up at the stars. Somewhere in Montana, Zvezda and Star were sleeping peacefully in their safe pasture, protected from the criminals who had once threatened their lives. Sarah thought about the documentary film that would soon tell their story to millions of people around the world. She hoped that everyone who heard about Zvezda and Star would remember that animals need humans to protect them from those who would harm them. The case had officially ended with the arrest of Maria Santos, but Sarah knew that the real impact of that snowy night would continue for years to come. Every time a law enforcement officer recognized a stolen animal, every time an international trafficking ring was shut down, every time someone chose to help an animal in need, Zvezda's legacy would live on. Sarah went inside her house and looked at the photographs on her mantel. There were pictures from her years as a park ranger, but the newest ones showed her with Zvezda and Star. These were the photos that meant the most to her. As she got ready for bed, Sarah reflected on how much her life had changed since that February night. She had become an expert on animal trafficking, a public speaker, and an advocate for stronger animal protection laws. She had testified in federal court, worked with international investigators, and helped put dangerous criminals in prison. But the thing she was most proud of was simple. She had refused to let 2 innocent animals die alone in a snowstorm. Sometimes the most important moments in life come disguised as ordinary days. Sarah had gone to work thinking it would be just another winter patrol. Instead, she had found her life's purpose in a desperate horse's eyes. Now, as she looked forward to her new role as a consultant, Sarah knew that she would never stop fighting for animals who could not fight for themselves. Zvezda and Star had taught her that every animal's life was worth saving, and that lesson would guide her for the rest of her career. The golden horses of heaven, as Colonel Volkov had called them, were finally safe, and their story would inspire others to protect innocent animals for generations to come.